What's up, Steelers fans? You're back at Around the Burgh with Mitch and Shane. We're back, as I always say. We're going to recap the Steelers' second preseason game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Another win, 24-16. Like I said last week, it's always better to be 2-0 than 0-2. Shane, how are we doing this week?
I said undefeated in the preseason. Does it mean anything? Questionably, probably not, but I'll take it.
I did see a crazy stat that I don't remember what the score was for their game this week, but John Harbaugh has won, I think, 17 consecutive preseason games, the Ravens, which is the longest streak dating back to Vince Lombardi, which is insane.
Yeah, I mean the problem with preseason games, right, is like the biggest reason why record doesn't matter is because obviously they don't count for anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just also hard to just like do the things the preseason games are meant to be for, and also consistently win because you're really there to look at players, not necessarily have a strategy to win the game every time. Like, it's more getting guys in the right positions to see if they can play in certain ways. So it's tough.
Yeah, and I think it was Zimmer. I think for the Vikings also has a
Yeah,
pretty substantial preseason winning record. But
he
anyways, we're
does
gonna
good.
after that little diatribe, we're gonna get back to the Steelers. Shane, for me, this felt deja vu esque in terms of this game compared to the first game against the Cowboys. This game was eerily similar in terms of the narrative of how the game played out.
Right.
What did you think about the game?
Really, the biggest difference, honestly, is just the fact that we saw better quarterback play from the team overall. That's really the most significant difference. Is especially Rudolph and Haskins were much more efficient, and they looked a little bit more in command. Haskins, especially, which we'll definitely talk about more about him here, but that was really the biggest difference. The run game was still hit or miss occasionally. The offensive line, you could tell they're still figuring things out, but it's definitely very similar to last year.
Yeah,
Or
so
last game. Yeah.
right. So kind of like last week, like the ones and some twos got off to kind of a slow start.
Yeah.
The opposition took the lead pretty quickly. And then as the game kind of unfolded, we saw the Steelers' second, third, and fourth stringers really take over. And I think especially in the run game in the second half, we saw those like third and fourth string offensive linemen really take it to the Eagles defensive front seven, which I think I tweeted this like, does this really matter that our back end of the roster guys are beating up theirs at the end of a game? But I think your analysis of the quarterback thing is really important as well, in that I think Rudolph was almost identical. Like, I think he missed one pass. He had he had one big bomb of a throw. And I still think he looked kind of scared in the pocket. Like, if the pocket starts collapsing, he just kind of freezes and doesn't really know what to do with himself. And I think that long term is going to be a problem for him if he wants to, succeed Ben Roethlisberger as the starting quarterback and in general just succeed in the NFL.
That's definitely going to be one of the things, because we've talked about this several times now, leading into now that we're playing games and getting to see these guys in live action. Rudolph kind of is what he is, right? Like, there's only so many things he can improve on that can help his case to be even, like, I think a long-term backup is pretty well set in stone for him, most likely. But even that is, after assuming the Steelers don't keep him after next year, depending on what happens, even that's kind of in jeopardy for him, I think, depending on the scheme. But he needs to show things like poise in the pocket, consistency with making the right reads. Like, those are the things that you can somewhat control, at least, whereas he can't really control, obviously, his talent level. That's what's going to drag him down, is if he can't do those things.
Definitely. And I think the thing people say at the preseason is like, oh, like, you're not playing with all the starters, like, you're playing with some backups, like, it's not, might not be fair to fully evaluate in that way. And to that, I would say I generally agree with that. However, at some point in your NFL career, like, the pocket is going to start collapsing and there's going to be key moments and you need to deliver. And if he's not delivering when he's under pressure, that's just going to be a problem throughout his career. So, and then moving on to Haskins, again, like, he came in, he played the majority of the game. I thought he played better than Rudolph. I think we saw him multiple times, when the pocket collapses for him, he's still able to, keep his eyes, at least like keep his eyes moving around, maybe not necessarily all the way downfield, but, he's able to say like, okay, like, maybe I just need to get out of here and get upfield as fast as I can and get a few yards, or I can find guys in the flat and check it down. And, there was, I think, one throw where he was booting out to the right and he threw it back kind of across his body. It wasn't the best throw. And then I think it was Gentry, dropped it. And, it wasn't, again, an elite throw, but he, it was relatively on target. The tight end should have caught it. And then we saw it again later when he threw the touchdown to Anthony Johnson in the back of the end zone. I just think that this is where I'd really like to see him get some reps against some second stringers and starters to see if like is what we are seeing legit, or is it just the product of playing against inferior competition?
That's going to be the question with him, is realistically, like, because of the fact that Rudolph's been getting these starts and playing the majority of first quarter or so far the first 2 games we played, that's about as long as we've gotten the true, like, some starters and then the true backups that are likely to make the roster playing against him. Like, he hasn't gotten those reps yet. And until we see him do that, it is going to be really hard to evaluate him as far as where he's at in the offense, because it's a lot easier to obviously go through your reads if guys are getting open a lot faster. You don't have to make as many tough decisions with the football. But it's going to come down to, is he going to get a chance to start one of these next 2 games? Like, we know Ben's playing next week.
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to be the second guy? Is he going to be the guy coming off the bench first? Probably not, the way that they've been playing this. Until then, it's going to be hard to know.
Yeah, I would really love to see him start the 4th game, our annual matchup with the Panthers,
Right.
Which I don't really know exactly why that is. I mean, I know Tepper took over. I mean, we've been playing them since before Tepper took over ownership there.
Are weird.
It's been, yeah, like
weird.
Of all the teams, I don't really know what the deal is there, but it's always funny. That's always our 4th game. So like I said, like I'd love to see him start that game just to see, like, obviously there's going to be even less starters playing in that game, but I just want to see him against, some more second stringers, some guys who are going to be actually having some significant playing time in the NFL. As I mentioned with the offensive line, we saw a few guys getting more into the game. We saw Kevin Dotson finally take the field and
play. Yeah.
And I'm watching the broadcast tape, so it's a little hard to evaluate offensive line.
Right, it is for sure.
But from all accounts, it seemed that he was excellent, and again, playing against some backups, but he was dominating his competition. So that's great to see. But I mean, throughout the game, we really, especially after the starters really came out, we saw those backups, the offensive line, really take over the game. So what did you see from the offensive line, especially in the latter parts of the game, that you thought were good and bad, I guess?
I think, like you said, it's tough to really say how much it matters, because we mostly started dominating them in the trenches once we got to like that, some second, mostly third string guys getting in there for both us and the Eagles. So how many of those guys are on the team week 1? Probably not many. But I think what we can take away, hopefully, at least a little bit, is the mentality that Clem has brought, the new offensive line coach has brought to that unit in general, with the intensity, with the physicality. That's probably the only thing we can really take away that's going to hopefully be applicable to the regular season. And I think that's going to be the key to how successful this team can be as a running offense, because the more successful we can be on the ground every week, the less we have to rely on Ben to be anything more than an average quarterback. Like, right. The more we can take off his plate as far as what he has to do just to get the offense moving every week, the more comfortable he's going to be doing some of the play action stuff that we really need him to do, doing those types of things, being more, relaxed in the pocket, because he's not going to have guys teeing off on him every play because they know we're running, throwing the ball 60 times like we did sometimes last year. Yeah. That's really the biggest thing that we can do from an offensive line standpoint, is get enough push in the run game to make teams have to honor that, and, let Ben get comfortable with some of the stuff that Canada's going to ask him to do.
Right. And I think continuing that argument to like the running backs, we saw a lot of different running backs get carries this week. It seemed that Kalen Ballage kind of took a back seat this week. I don't think he didn't get any carries.
I'm not sure. He might be dealing with an injury. I can't remember.
Okay. Sure. Okay. But we saw Anthony McFarland, we saw Jalen Samuels, we saw Tony Burks James, and even Pete Guerrero signed. Yeah. And Harris, obviously, he had 2 carries early on, 2 for 10. So good to see again. But we saw a lot of those like backup running backs take the field. And I think that for them, it's especially poignant about playing backups, because we saw like Jalen Samuels having a lot of success, Tony Burks James having a lot of success. And I think those guys played a good bit in like 2019 when the team was really down bad and they weren't really producing up to an NFL standard. So I'd take those productions with a grain of salt. But Anthony McFarland, I think we saw a lot of good stuff from him. And I think we've talked a lot about him, and I think we both are fans of him. And I think what we saw from him against the Eagles is really encouraging.
I really agree with that. And that's actually what I wanted to talk about with running backs, is him. Like, the key thing with him is he needs to show that he can be physical enough, right? Mm-hmm. We know that he has really good speed when he gets a hole and he can run through and he has no guys in front of him. That's the biggest thing. He's a home run type of running back. Mm-hmm. I mean, he averaged in his only season with Canada, he had in college in 2018, he averaged 8 yards a carry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, like
yeah, that's not
he's a chunk yardage.
Yeah.
That's what he is trying to do. But obviously, as we know this, unless you're a guy that's an absolutely like generational talent running back, it is really hard to go for that home run hitting play every time and be successful.
Mm.
He needs to be able to get 2-3 yards after contact. He needs to be able to push the pile, with the center of gravity and being, a little over 200 pounds still. So he's not a small guy. He's just not a power back, which is fine. But you have to at least have the leg drive and the will to at least get those couple extra yards. And that's how you go from, 3 yards a carry to 4+ in the NFL, is having that ability to move that pile just a little bit. And he's been showing a lot more of that physicality so far this preseason.
Yeah, and we saw that on the goal line where he was,
Yes.
there wasn't really a lot there, but he was able to at least kind of bounce and find a way into the end zone, getting around the offensive line basically. But, where there's a will, there's a way. And if you're producing touchdown, it's better than not. We'll take that every day of the week. I think that he's definitely coming into that running back 2 role. I'm not, because Benny Snell's been hurt. I think Snell is going to be healthy this week, so we might see him get some snaps after Najee's initial few drives. I'm not sure how long that's going to last during the regular season, given McFarland's ability to succeed, especially more so than I think Snell will in this scheme. So I think by probably at the very latest midseason, we'll see McFarland in that running back 2 role, especially if he's showing the kind of prowess in the receiving game that I think is possible. And he's kind of been showing in camp, apparently.
Yeah.
All right. So we were talking a lot about Anthony McFarland's stock and how that's something we're definitely buying in on. But I want to talk to you about Symbol, which is the stock market for sports. Shane loves my transitions.
I do love the transitions there.
It's just a work of art trying to fit them in every time. Anyways, Symbol is the stock market for sports where you can buy and sell virtual shares of your favorite teams using real money. Each time your team wins, you earn a win payout. If your team loses, you lose nothing. Symbol offers trading for the NFL, NBA, and MLB, with college football coming in the fall. Visit www.symbol.com today and use promo code SteelersATB to earn a $10 deposit bonus on your first deposit. That's www.simbull.com. All right, so we talked about the stock for the running back Anthony McFarland. We're going to talk about the stock for the defense. So from what I saw in this game from the defense is, again, they kind of had those early struggles going into that bend don't break mold where they would allow some big plays. The running game was pretty successful against them. They'd get in the red zone and then they'd kind of buckle down.
Yeah.
And then in the second, third, and in the later part of the game, we saw them really get after the quarterback, create some turnovers. We had two interceptions, one from Justin Lane, which is great to see, another from freshly signed Lafayette Pitts. A lot of sacks, a lot of pressure on the quarterback in the latter parts of the game. So we like to see that. But we have to come back to the beginning part of the game where a lot of the linebackers were really struggling in coverage. We saw Devin Bush get burned a few times. We saw Ulysses Gilbert get burned. Robert Spillane was having a tough night. So Shane, before we get into what the Steelers have done to remedy this, what were your takeaways as you're watching this transpire with the Eagles receivers kind of taking advantage of the Steelers' troubles at linebacker?
Unfortunately, this is something that we are used to as Steelers fans, I think for the past several years, where a combination of not having good cover linebackers, but then also asking them to sometimes take assignments that just don't really make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not a defensive coordinator in the NFL, so I'll try to not to talk too much about that. But generally, I don't want really any linebacker on this team covering anybody that is a true receiver.
Keith Butler special.
Right. Yeah. It's just like, geez, like even, sometimes they'll even have Watt do it. I'm like, just let him if you want to do a drop zone, fine. He has the athletic ability, but let's not play this game where but you don't know. I don't need to explain it to you, but that's the biggest problem we're going to have is, one, can these guys cover the players they really should even be covering? So we're talking the tight ends, running backs out of the backfield, maybe some slower, bigger receivers that maybe don't have great separation, but guys like that, like if they can cover them well enough, that's one thing. But if you're going to ask them to cover true receivers occasionally, then right now we don't have a guy that can do that. Even Bush he's not quite there. I hope he gets there. He has all the athletic ability to get there. He just hasn't, played as much as he could have with his injuries and everything, and also just needs more time to figure things out. So it was tough to watch.
Right. And I think something we talked about when the Vince Williams retirement news came down the pipe is that this is going to This is going to force Devin Bush even more so into a role that I particularly don't think he is as well suited for as he is for playing that Vince Williams type role where he's playing, I believe they call it the buck linebacker.
Yeah,
that's
buck linebacker.
staying in the box, blitzing, stopping the run. He's much better at that. He can cover, some running backs, some tight ends. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Receivers, it's a toss up. The more athletic tight ends like Zach Ertz, that kind of thing, like that's going to give him trouble. And we saw guys like Spillane and Ulysses Gilbert III get absolutely torched by those kind of guys. And I don't really know how Ulysses Gilbert III is making this roster at this point.
I don't know.
But and I say that especially as the news we got in the middle of the game that from a very, very, very close source to the person in question, that Joe Schobert, who is a linebacker for the Jacksonville Jaguars, formerly of the Cleveland Browns, was being traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that close source was his wife, I believe,
who
said, who basically used the word yins in a tweet indicating that Joe Schobert would be heading to Pittsburgh. Joe Schobert was previously, I believe, he was a Pro Bowl linebacker for the Browns. And I think if Steelers fans remember back to the 2018 and 19 games, actually, he was very instrumental in the 2018 tie with the Browns to open the season and the late 2019 game, the Mason Rudolph Myles Garrett game, where I believe he had at least one interception, possibly returned for a touchdown. So he's
I think so. Maybe.
Yes, so he is an excellent coverage linebacker, and we didn't know the compensation at the time, but it's recently came out that it's for a 2022 6th round pick. So, Shane, give me your thoughts on this trade, the compensation, and what you think Joe Schobert brings to this defense.
First, the compensation, obviously. If you're giving up a late 6th round pick, which is what it's going to be, most likely, it's really hard to be too worried about whatever you're getting, unless it's a player that doesn't probably make the roster. So with Schobert, the compensation is not a problem. I think the interesting thing, though, and a lot of people, I know that when I saw this move come over Twitter and we started seeing reactions to it, a lot of people were just wondering kind of what's going on with it. Why would the Jaguars give him up for a 6th round pick? And it's pretty simple. And this is the type of stuff that happens. He's a high-priced veteran who doesn't seem to mesh with the coaching staff they brought in, and they wanted to get him off the teams, get some of the money, off the books, and also not have to worry about having a player that's not going to play as much as you probably should be playing on that contract. And Colbert had the wherewithal, seeing the linebacker situation and as it currently is, to say, okay, I'll go get a primarily coverage linebacker on a deal that we can fit with the salary cap situation that we created with, obviously some of the moves with the voided years and everything. Having that cap space allowed us to absorb his contract. And now you get a guy who's going to be able to slot in as a primary coverage player in the second, in the front seven. And then we can not have to worry as much about whether Spillane comes around or whether Bush can handle certain assignments.
Right. And I was just shocked when the compensation was officially released that they traded a 6th round pick for this guy who's a former Pro Bowl linebacker in the middle of a pretty lucrative deal, which apparently the Jaguars will be paying upwards of $3 million of his salary this year. So I don't really know how Kevin Colbert, I don't know what, pictures or DMs or messages he has on the Jaguars front office or coaching staff to make this deal possible. But I just can't imagine a world where this isn't a steal. Obviously he's got, after this year, there's an out where the Steelers can basically release him with 0 dead cap.
Yeah,
which is incredible. But I don't see and his salary is pretty high the next 3 years, but I don't really see a world where they're not going to keep him unless it's, another Avery Williamson situation. But this guy seems like he's primed to fit into this defense perfectly in that. And I think he talked about it to the press today. He said, I'm going to play the Mac linebacker, which is the opposite of the Buck linebacker. So he's going to take over that more coverage based role, and he's going to wear the green dot. He's going to play as the dime backer. So this guy's going to get a lot of playing time. He's going to be responsible for a lot of things. And I think this is a guy that, if this is perfect, because this allows Devin Bush to play that Buck inside linebacker role, to be able to rush the passer and stop the run. And then Joe Schobert can be more in charge of covering tight ends and receivers, which is something he's been excellent. Maybe he's not, covering, Tyreek Hill out of the slot, but, he can cover, your Jarvis Landry's, maybe not your Keenan Allen's. I'm sure Keith Butler's going to find a way to get Alex Highsmith on him anyways.
Yeah, it's pretty much guaranteed.
But I was just shocked that the Steelers were able to pull off this kind of a deal to get a player that they so desperately need. And like you were saying, like this is great because this means we don't have to rely on guys like Robert Spillane or a Marcus Allen or Miles Killebrew kicking down from safety on passing down.
Mm-hmm.
This is a true linebacker who can play in both phases of the run of the pass game and is probably most likely not going to be a liability in this defense.
No. And the thing that's nice about it too, especially like you said, is they are paying part of the salary, which allowed us to bring him in this year with our cap situation. Even though we do have some money still lying around, it was enough that we were able to get him in for the season. And then obviously the cap's going to be making a huge jump. Hopefully, going into next year, we'll have room to fit him if he does show up and play well. We don't have to worry about that. The only thing that doesn't make sense to me, and you kind of alluded to it, was how did no one else in the NFL jump on this for more compensation than this? Like you'd think there has to be somebody who was looking at the situation and understood that the Jaguars were looking to move him and we're going to be willing to give up at least a higher pick, maybe even not have to ask them to pay part of a salary this year. It's strange to me. Like it's not like he had a terrible, year last year or something like that, and you don't know what he's going to be or anything like that. I do think he's going to be at least a good coverage player and a guy that if you're going to have your linebackers cover guys that probably shouldn't, he at least has a shot opposed to asking the guys we have now to do it where it's not likely going to work out. There's really no reason to not make this move. And the fact that they did, I think really kind of helps elevate at least the floor of their pass coverage and their pass defense. Really helps add to that a lot.
Yeah, like I don't think he's Ryan Shazier, but I think there are very few people that are. But I think this is gonna make it to the point that I think at this point the one thing I'm really concerned about with this defense is the second corner position is because obviously Joe Hayden and Joe Hayden is asking for an extension. We didn't get a chance to talk about that last week, but I'm not really sure that that's realistic moving forward, but in terms of an immediate need at the second corner position, I'm still a little skeptical at James Pierre. I think Cameron Sutton's going to play a good bit out there, and then they're going to have to kind of have some kind of like rotation at the slot defender position. But that's something I'm still pretty concerned about as we go. We'll have to see like who's going to be the main starter there against the Lions. That might give us an indication as to who's going to be the primary starter there come week 1.
Right.
Go ahead.
Definitely tough because the problem that we're going to have, like you said, is like, realistically, I'd love for Sutton to be able to play in the slot most of the time. I think that's just his better position.
Yeah.
But it can't be at the expense of the second corner spot. So someone has to come up and actually firmly take that job from him in the sense that they don't need to necessarily be better than Sutton would be on the outside. They just have to be good enough that it makes more sense for him to be able to play inside. And so far, Pierre's probably the closest to that. But like you said, there's still been some issues here and there. I want to see him play against, some more starting receivers, hopefully the rest of the way, see what he can do there. Hopefully they ask him to do more than they have because he's kind of been playing a lot of off coverage. And I want to see what happens when they actually ask him to cover a guy straight up, just like go be better than him. I want to see more of that to see if he can handle that type of responsibility. So maybe Hayden doesn't always have to be the one to do that as he gets older.
Yeah, he might be just a guy that's more comfortable at the line of scrimmage where he can just battle at that. He obviously doesn't have like that much tape on him, so it's kind of hard to evaluate. But I think that might just be where he is going to be more comfortable moving forward. Well, that's all we have for this episode. But we're going to be back later this week with a guest on Jarrett Bailey, who's a pretty big Twitter presence in Steelers and football Twitter community. Really funny guy, friend of ours. We're going to talk all things Steelers. We're going to maybe get into the NFL 100, break down some of the quarterback battle. But in the meantime, Shane, where can people find you?
Just find me at Shane Kubas with a Y. I'll just make sure of that because otherwise, don't know if there's another Shane out there on Twitter that has my name, but you'll find him instead of me. And then you can also find out some of my stuff writing wise at the Steel Curtain if you check that out.
Awesome. And I'm at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE. Make sure you check out Around the Block. I'm going to be having an article come out tomorrow, which is previewing which Steelers players are most likely on the chopping block in the first round of preseason cuts. We've got that coming up on Tuesday. So you're going to want to check out who is going to be possibly the first 5 names that are getting cut. But in the meantime, thank you for tuning in to Around the Burgh, and we hope to see you back later this week.